Hi, folks. Today we're going to talk about unique constraints. Last time we met, we looked at not null and the default constraints. And so we're now looking at the next type of domain constraint it's used to maintain domain integrity, which is a unique constraint. Okay. And the way we declare unique constraints is very, very similar to how we declare primary key constraints. If you look at the syntax, you'll see it's what? The ellipsis, and then constraint, the constraint name, followed by the keyword unique, and whatever columns we want to say should be unique. Okay? And what's the number of columns? It's restricted by the upper limit is the number of columns are in the table. Okay? The minimum number you will have is a column. It doesn't make any sense. Let me write the SQL code and you'll see what I was about to say. If I write this, actually, let me do it this way because really want you to get into the habit of using the notes to practice stuff. I do Control V, then I'll replace this by what? Alter table. And let's go with customer dot customers, right? And what's going to be there's a constraint keyword, and then what's going to be, I'll put the constraint name. Let me call this name underscore UQ, right? Oh, and I have to, oh, there's a typo in here. This is my reason I like to do this. It should be add constraint. Now you see it likes that. But let's say I don't want to put any columns, right? What's this saying? You see, SQL doesn't like that. And if I run it, what happens? I actually don't need to highlight it because it's the only thing in there. Incorrect syntax. Why would that fail? Why write this if you're not going to put at least a column? So we need to put at least one column. And if I go over here on the left side to Object Explorer and I go into customer.customers, how many columns are there? It's about 5, right? So the minimum I'll put in is 1. The maximum I can put in is 5, or whatever that is. So now I'm going to make sure that the ID is, well, let's say the name is unique. There isn't a name column in there for customers I see. So I'll say name, right? Or maybe there is, and I'm not seeing it. So if I do, let's run this and see what it does. So I go execute. See, there's no name column. And it's good to get used to knowing what these error messages mean. You see, if I also click on that error message, it brings me to the line. And this one, you see, it says it can't contain the. So what I'm going to do now, which reminds me of something else, is you see what type of if. Let me go back. And you see, everything in here is getting really long and busy right now, isn't it? So when you see customers, from what we did last week, you know the customers over here, they have a liaison. So what would we assume? That if there's a liaison, that it's not individual, it's maybe a company, right? So maybe what I should do is I'm going to drop this table. Why am I going to drop it? There's no information in the table, right? But so I might drop this table and change its name to customer.wholesalers or customer.companies, right? And then I'll change the liaison is what? The company liaison. So I think I'll do that. But you might remember earlier when we talked about, let me alt tab, and all the way back here when we talk about creating tables in SQL and altering tables. Let me go to altering tables. Reason why is I want to show you how I can rename a table. So remember, is this renaming a column or a table? I'm going to rename the whole table. So this is a code. Oh, no, sorry, that's for renaming a column, right? Because how do I know it says column object type? How do I rename a table? This is a code sample. Oh, no. If you see here, this is an example. So I'll go copy and I'll go to Alt Tab and I'll go new query. Why am I doing some new query? It makes it a little bit easier. So I'll do Control V and I'll say this is, see when I'll go in here, Control C, Control V, and I'll change this to, I'll paste this over here again, Control V, and I'll change this to wholesalers. Oh, no, customer.companies, right? And I'm going to do a search and replace for this. So I'll go, why am I doing a search and replace? Sometimes it's useful to make sure you know how to do this. It can save a lot of time. So you see it put the apostrophe, and I'm going to replace that with single quote. Replace all. Go OK. And now I will run this and let's see what it does. Execute. See, it says caution can break scripts and stored procedures. So I'll go editor. Did it change it? How can I see? If I go refresh, go to tables. You see it's changed. Oops. You see the problem there? So it's now put customer.companies. So that's why I didn't need to say, I could have just said, that's an issue. I'm not going to try and fix it. What I'm going to do here is I'll just drop it. Actually, I'll do customer. So now what if I want to change it? You see what? So what I won't change it through here. Like I said, I almost never rename tables or columns this way. Most of the time, whenever I do that, it's just something I'm going to drop. So what I'm going to do instead, I will drop it over here. Go OK. It's dropped. And now I'm going to copy this. And one reason why I'm going to copy this is I'm going to make all kinds of changes here. Because you've now seen where we have all of these constraints are piling up. And today I'm going to play with unique constraints. Okay. So I'm going to go no, go no, no, and I'm going to go new query. And I will paste this in here. And why am I pasting this in here? I'm going to change this customer.companies. And I could have just replaced, I'll change that companies also. Right? And I'll say the ID, and I'm going to take this away. And I'll say that's not null. right? What am I saying is not null. Every company has to have an ID. I'll change this to liaison, liaison ID, right? Street address, and I'll put name, varchar 50. Some people like to use varchar 100, but I feel like there's no name that's going to be 100 characters long. And every company has to have a name, right? They might not have to have a liaison ID. They might not. We might want the street address, city, state, zip. So, especially if we're going to mail them things. So what I could do is I'm going to put, let's make, this is, we'll assume that this street address is the mailing address, right? So I won't put that in there. And they might have a website, email. What do we need to be not null? We need this not null, right? Not null. Not null. Because if we have a customer, we probably need some way of sending them official or legal documents. So we need a mailing address for that, don't we? We don't necessarily need an email or a phone. It would be nice to have, but we don't need that. We will give a customer an ID. The company must have a name, right? So now I've set all of that to be not null. And I'll go in here, and what we also want. Remember earlier I did something, we might have a default for the phone number, right? So I'm going to go in there and put in default phone number. And maybe for the default phone number and email, we want to say none, right? And so what we'll do, I'm kind of repeating stuff, but so I'm going to do this, Control C, Control V, and I'm going to say add. I'll change this to alter and go. Constraint. Let's say company phone DF default is none for phone, right? And I can just copy this, Control C, Control V, Control V, and now you see I'm going to change this to email. Website, and I'll set this to email, website. Right? And this is done, so I'll say, right. So if you look here, I've done all of my default constraints. I'm assuming that why didn't I set a default for these street address, city, and state, and zip? Well, those we're assuming that they're going to be unique, right? Just like the name and the ID. Okay. We might want to say, well, now if you look at this, is it possible that we might have two branches of the same company so that they might have the same name, but then they should have different IDs and addresses, right? So maybe if we think of that, we allow the name to be unique, or better yet, we'll say name and then the branch number. That might be a good. So what I'll do instead, well, let's just leave it like this for now. And so now I've done this, and we're going to put in the unique constraints. So the way I like to do things is I'll just copy this, Control C, Control V, and I'll change this now to what? Actually, to make it easy, I'm going to go Control C, Control X, new query, Control V, and everywhere I see default, then you do this edit, find quick replace default with unique and replace all. And then I'll also change DF to UQ and place all. Go OK. So you see, why did I do that? It just saves some time. Control X, Control V. And remember, since these are default values and I allow them to be blank, I don't want the phone, email, and other stuff to be unique if they're blank. What do I require is unique? So I'm going to change this to company ID and company name. And what others? Probably street address. Yeah, I'll change street address. So I'll change street address. Two companies can be in the same city, state, and zip. So that I'll leave. So now you see I can now go Control C, Control V, Control C, Control V, Control C, and Control V. And you see, this isn't right, is it? So what I'll need to do is I'm going to cut this again. The reason why, actually, I don't need to cut it. Yes, I will. Well, I could, but if you notice, these are all have what? Unique and for. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go. Actually, it will still be easier. You'll see. No, actually, I'll just do it here. I'll select this part up to here. Go edit. Find quick replace. And I'll do unique space open brace and replace all of those. See, it's got done with that part. Now I just need to put closing brace, closing brace, closing brace. And you see, I now have set my unique constraint. And why do I like to do this? Remember, I find this easier to read. Okay, so let's run this code. Execute. It completed successfully. I'll refresh the tables. And there we see a customer.companies. Go columns. Do we see a primary key? No, we don't have a primary key. So if I go keys, but what do we see? We have these unique constraints, right? And then we have a default constraint. So I'm going to go back here. And what I'll do is I'm going to add, copy this one, Control C, Control V. And why did I indent those? Because I was doing multiple and it's a bit long. I'm going to change this to company score PK. And you might recall earlier I like to do my surrogate ID. Take that the primary key, so I'm going to do this. I'll change this to surrogate ID. And I'll go in here and I'll put another column in here. ID. Int. Okay. And say that's not null. And I'll also go copy in here. Constraint company surrogate ID underscore UQ unique surrogate ID. Okay, and then I'll just run this all over again. Why am I doing it? You see, I could have done because there's nothing in the table, and I'll just play it. So let's run that. Whoops. Companies. Oh, you see, I need to copy. Control C. Control V. And execute. Yeah. And now what I'll do. So now if I go refresh. See, these are all not null. I have my primary key. You see a primary key and unique are considered to be keys. They don't go under constraints. And what else did we need to talk about when it comes to primary to unique constraints? Let's see, is there anything else? So I did the table rename. You see that didn't work exactly the way I wanted it to. Like I said, I usually don't like to rename tables or columns. When you're playing around with databases, I think it's just so much better to. You never know how things will break, so just leave things alone. Maybe you do everything when you're testing or in the design. So we've done that. You see examples over here. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is multi-column unique constraints. Why would we do that? In the notes, they have an example of a book. Okay, let's say we have a title. We say a title is unique. Lots of books have the same title. So we don't want to say the title is unique. In this next example, they say what title and author ID. Now, the author ID comes from a different table. We don't want to say that the author ID and the title should be unique. We want to define things in terms of itself. So we don't want to use the author ID. We want to use something related to the book. And in this but you see that there's multiple columns. Over here, so what did they do? They dropped that. They dropped that. Now if you look here, they gave this constraint title author ID. You can imagine if you have multiple columns, the constraint name becomes really long, and it doesn't help. And they dropped it again. What are they doing over here? They're using the title, the ISBN number, publication date, and the edition have to be unique. See, these all have to do with a book, not the author, right? And instead of having all of these, we just say book, it's unique. Why? Because this is what makes a book unique. Okay. And I think that's everything I need to say about unique constraints.